universe was silent, save for the hum of the Galactic Council's massive flagship as it drifted through the endless void. For centuries, the Council had reigned supreme, a coalition of advanced alien species united under the promise of order and peace. But for humanity, that promise had been a death sentence. 3,000 years ago, Earth, the birthplace of humankind, had been obliterated, a casualty in the Council's relentless pursuit of dominance. The official story was one of necessity. Humanity had grown too defiant, too unpredictable. The truth was simpler. They had been afraid. Humanity, in its brief existence among the stars, had proven itself adaptable, innovative, and stubborn beyond reason. Where others saw obstacles, humans saw challenges. Where others followed rules, humans bent them. The Galactic Council saw potential but also chaos. And so, they made the decision to extinguish the threat before it could grow. Earth was annihilated, its surface reduced to ash and molten rock. Survivors were scattered across the galaxy, hunted, enslaved, or forced into hiding. For generations, humanity was little more than a memory, a cautionary tale whispered in the Council's halls. But humanity was not extinct. Far from it. They had survived, as they always did. In the shadows of the galaxy's fringes, on desolate moons and inhospitable planets, humans endured. They adapted to environments no other species dared to inhabit. They built ships from scrap, traded in secrets, and learned to hide in plain sight. Over centuries, their scattered remnants became a network, a whisper, a resistance. Now, after 3 millennia, that whisper had grown into a roar. The story begins aboard a stealth vessel, cutting through the darkness of space, its sleek frame painted black to blend seamlessly with the void. Inside, the hum of the engines was the only sound, save for the occasional murmur of its crew. They were a small team, but every movement they made was precise, calculated. This was not the first mission they'd undertaken, but it was, by far, the most important. One of the crew members, a man with sharp eyes and a worn expression, stared at a holographic display hovering before him. The image showed a sprawling alien metropolis, the heart of the Galactic Council's power. Towers of glass and metal pierced the clouds, and streams of light from countless ships moved in orderly patterns. It was a city built on the spoils of 1,000 conquered worlds, and its very existence was an insult to everything humanity had once stood for. "This is it," the man said quietly, "the beginning of the end." A younger crew member, her hands deftly adjusting the ship's controls, glanced over her shoulder. "You think they know we're coming?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. "If they don't, they'll find out soon enough," the man replied. He turned to another figure seated nearby, a woman with an air of quiet authority. "Are the others in position?" The woman nodded. "We've received confirmation from all units. They're ready. The moment we hit their outer defenses, they'll move in." "Good," the man said, though there was no satisfaction in his voice. This wasn't about revenge, at least not entirely. It was about survival. About proving that humanity's fire had not been extinguished, that they were more than the Council's propaganda would have the galaxy believe. As the ship drew closer to its target, the crew prepared for what lay ahead. Weapons were checked and rechecked, battle plans reviewed one last time. They were a small force, outnumbered and outgunned, but they had one advantage: the element of surprise. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had believed humanity to be broken, scattered, and weak. Tonight, They would learn how wrong they were. The ship's pilot brought them out of stealth just as they reached the outer edge of the alien metropolis. Instantly, alarms blared. The city's defense systems sprang to life, and dozens of alien fighters scrambled to intercept the intruder. But the humans were ready. As the pilot weaved through the oncoming fire, the ship's gunners returned fire with precision. Explosions lit up the night, and for the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council's forces tasted fear. On the ground below, chaos erupted as the Resistance's other units launched their coordinated assault. Saboteurs infiltrated key installations, planting charges that would cripple the city's infrastructure. Fighters engaged alien troops in the streets, their movements swift and ruthless. And above it all, the Council's leaders watched in disbelief, their confidence shaken by the sheer audacity of the attack. But this was only the beginning. The humans had no illusions about the difficulty of their task. The Galactic Council's forces were vast, their resources nearly limitless. Victory would not come easily, if at all. But that wasn't the point. The point was to send a message to the Council, to the galaxy, and to themselves. Humanity had risen, and they would not be ignored. As the battle raged on, the crew aboard the stealth vessel pressed forward, deeper into the heart of the alien metropolis. Their mission was clear: to deliver a blow so devastating that the Council would never recover. But as they approached their target, a chilling realization began to take shape. The Council had anticipated their attack. This wasn't just a city, it was a trap. The holographic display before them flickered, revealing a message transmitted from the Council's flagship. It was a voice, cold and calculating, speaking in a language the humans had come to know all too well. "You should have stayed in the shadows," it said. "You should have known your place." And then, with a burst of energy, the city's defenses activated in full force. Massive turrets emerged from hidden compartments, unleashing torrents of plasma fire. Alien reinforcements poured in from all directions, their weapons trained on the humans. The crew's leader clenched his fists, his mind racing as he considered their options. Retreat was not an option. Not now. Not ever. "We've come too far to turn back," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We fight for Earth, for humanity." And with that, they plunged headlong into the fray, their resolve unshaken even as the odds stacked higher against them. They knew the price of failure, but they also knew the value of hope. And in that moment, as explosions lit up the alien sky, they became more than survivors. They became a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit, a force that no amount of time or power could destroy. The battle was far from over, and the outcome was uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity had returned, and they were not afraid to fight for their place among the stars. The crew braced themselves as their ship hurtled through the storm of plasma fire and energy blasts. The city's defenses were overwhelming, but every member of the team knew this was a fight they couldn't afford to lose. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder as the pilot pushed it to its limits, weaving through the chaos with desperate precision. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the control panels, but no one flinched. They were past the point of fear. This was survival and defiance. As explosions rocked the ship, the leader turned to the woman managing the comm station. "Send out a signal to the ground teams. They need to know it's a trap." Her fingers flew over the console, but her expression darkened. "They're jamming us. I can't get anything through." The man cursed under his breath. "Then we'll do this the hard way. Adjust course for the main tower. If we can take out their command center, It might give the others a chance. That's suicide, the younger crew member said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. It's the mission, the leader replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. We knew what we were signing up for. The ship banked hard, diving straight toward the alien city's central spire. Its sleek design was a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding it, an imposing reminder of the Galactic Council's power. Energy shields shimmered around the tower, absorbing the brunt of the human resistance's attacks. It was clear the Council had spared no expense in fortifying their stronghold. Meanwhile, on the ground, the resistance fighters were locked in fierce combat. The streets of the metropolis had become a battlefield, with human forces using guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the alien troops. Every corner, every alley was a potential ambush site. Despite their smaller numbers, the humans fought with a determination born of centuries of oppression. One of the ground leaders, a grizzled veteran with a scar running down his cheek, barked orders to his team. Keep moving. Don't let them pin us down. He paused to fire a precise shot from his energy rifle, taking down an alien soldier who had emerged from the shadows. We've got one chance at this, people. Let's make it count. The resistance fighters pressed on, their objective clear: disable the city's power grid. Without it, the Council's defenses would falter, giving humanity a fleeting but crucial window to strike. But every step forward was met with fierce resistance. Alien drones buzzed overhead, their weapons firing in rapid bursts. Armored walkers stomped through the streets, their heavy cannons tearing through cover. And yet, the humans kept fighting. Back on the ship, the crew faced their own challenges. Closer they got to the central spire, the heavier the fire became. The shields were struggling to hold, and the hull groaned under the strain. The pilot gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the controls tightly. We're not going to last much longer at this rate, she warned. Just get us close, the leader said. That's all we need. The woman at the weapons station interrupted. We've got incoming. Looks like a squadron of their fighters. Can we shake them? Not unless you want me to crash us into the tower, the pilot replied, her tone grim but laced with dry humor. The leader sighed. All right. Take evasive action. We'll deal with them ourselves. Weapons, focus on the fighters. Make every shot count. As the ship twisted and turned, the crew worked in unison to fend off their attackers. Energy blasts lit up the darkness, illuminating the desperation etched on their faces. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually make it, but then a massive explosion rocked the ship, sending sparks flying and knocking the crew from their seats. We've lost the aft shields. The woman at the comm station shouted. Redirect power from non-essential systems, the leader ordered. We're not done yet. Despite the damage, the ship pressed on, its course unwavering. The central spire loomed ever closer, its energy shields glowing ominously. The crew knew this was a one-way trip. There was no turning back, no retreat. But none of them hesitated. They had all lost too much to the Galactic Council to falter now. Meanwhile, on the ground, the resistance fighters finally reached the power grid's control center. It was a heavily guarded facility, its entrances blocked by towering alien guards and automated turrets. The ground leader surveyed the scene, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. All right, listen up, he said to his team. We're going to hit them hard and fast. No hesitation. If we can take out those turrets, we'll have a clear shot at the controls. Once we're in, set the charges and get out. Understood. The team nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. They knew the odds, but they also knew what was at stake. With a signal from their leader, they moved into position, their weapons at the ready. The first explosion took the alien guards by surprise, creating a brief moment of chaos. The humans capitalized on it, moving swiftly to disable the turrets. The air was filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouted commands as the resistance fighters pushed forward. Every second felt like an eternity, but eventually they reached the control center. Inside, the team worked quickly, planting charges on the facility's main power conduits. The ground leader glanced at his watch, his heart pounding. They had only minutes to get clear before the charges detonated. "Move out! Out!" he shouted, leading the way as his team retreated. As they emerged from the facility, the charges went off, sending a shockwave rippling through the city. Lights flickered and dimmed, and the hum of the energy shields began to waver. For the first time, it seemed like the tide might be turning, but the battle was far from over. The Council's forces were regrouping, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the resistance. And in the skies above, the crew aboard the stealth vessel faced their own reckoning. The Central Spire's defenses were activating, targeting the damaged ship with relentless precision. "We're out of time," the pilot said, her voice tight with urgency. "If we're going to do this, we have to do it now." The leader nodded, his jaw set. "Take us in." Full speed. The ship surged forward, its engines roaring as it barreled toward the spire. The crew exchanged brief glances, a silent understanding passing between them. This was the moment they had fought for, the moment they had sacrificed everything to reach. As the ship closed in on its target, the leader took a deep breath, his thoughts turning to the countless lives lost over the centuries. This was for them, for humanity. The screen went white as the ship collided with the spire, a blinding explosion consuming everything in its path. The ground shook, and the city's defenses faltered. For a brief moment, it seemed like victory might be within reach. But as the dust began to settle, a new threat emerged. From the wreckage of the spire, a towering alien war machine rose, its eyes glowing with malice. The battle was far from over, and the Resistance's greatest challenge had only just begun. The dust settled slowly, revealing the full might of the alien war machine as it emerged from the wreckage. It stood taller than any structure left standing, its metallic frame glinting under the faint, flickering lights of the damaged city. Each step it took sent shockwaves through the ground, rattling the Resistance fighters who were already scrambling to regroup. Its glowing eyes swept over the battlefield, locking onto clusters of human forces. A low mechanical growl emanated from its core, sending shivers down the spines of everyone who heard it. "Fall back," the ground leader shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Regroup near the transport. We're not equipped to take this thing down." The Resistance fighters hesitated for only a moment before following the order, retreating through the rubble-strewn streets. The towering machine raised one of its massive arms, and a pulse of energy shot forth, obliterating a building in their path. The shockwave knocked several fighters off their feet, debris raining down as the machine advanced. From his position, the ground leader grabbed his comms device and tried to raise any remaining allies in the sky. "Command, do you read? We're under attack by some kind of... I don't even know what to call it. We need air support, now." Static crackled on the other end. The jamming signals were still in place, cutting them off from any reinforcements. He cursed under his breath, his mind racing for options. Around him, the surviving fighters looked to him for direction, their faces pale with fear and exhaustion. "Keep moving," he urged them. "We can't stop now." As they navigated the crumbling cityscape, the machine's relentless pursuit continued. Its energy weapons fired in calculated bursts, each one designed to herd the humans into a tighter corner. It was as if the machine was toying with them, studying their movements and weaknesses. The leader knew they couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan, and fast. At the same time, high above the battlefield, another ship cloaked in stealth technology watched the chaos unfold. This was not a resistance vessel, but something far older, something that had been hiding in the shadows for centuries, waiting for the right moment to act. Inside, a lone figure observed the events below, their expression unreadable. They tapped a series of commands into their console, sending a discreet signal that pierced through the Council's jamming fields. The message was brief, but carried with it a promise. Help was on the way. Back on the ground, the Resistance fighters finally reached a temporary shelter, a partially collapsed parking structure that provided some cover from the war machine's attacks. The leader gathered his team, taking stock of their supplies and injuries. It was a grim tally. Many of their weapons had been destroyed or lost during the retreat, and the fighters themselves were battered and bleeding. "We're not going to survive another direct hit from that thing," one of the fighters said, her voice shaking. "What are we supposed to do?" The leader didn't have an answer. His mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each one more desperate than the last. He knew that waiting here was suicide, but charging back into the fray with their current resources was just as hopeless. As he struggled to find a solution, a faint beeping sound caught his attention. He looked down at his comms device, which was flashing with a new signal. "This is Resistance Command," a voice said, faint but clear. "We've received your distress call. Reinforcements are en route. Hold your position and prepare for extraction." Relief washed over the group, but it was short-lived. The ground shook violently as the war machine approached their location. Its massive frame loomed over the structure, and it was clear that it would not stop until every human in its path was eliminated. The leader turned to his team. "You heard them. Reinforcements are coming. We just need to buy them time. Spread out and keep that thing distracted. Don't let it focus on one spot." The fighters nodded, their fear tempered by the faint glimmer of hope. They took up positions around the structure, using what little cover they could find to launch a coordinated attack on the machine. Their weapons were pitifully small in comparison, but they aimed for its joints and sensors, hoping to at least slow it down. The machine responded with cold efficiency, its weapons targeting the sources of fire with deadly precision. One by one, the Resistance's makeshift defenses were torn apart, but the fighters held their ground. They knew the stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could still fight back, even against impossible odds. As the battle raged on, the faint hum of engines grew louder in the distance. A squadron of resistant ships appeared on the horizon, their sleek forms cutting through the smoke-filled skies. "This is Captain of the Hammerfall," a voice announced. "We've got eyes on your position. Hold tight. We're bringing the cavalry." The sight of the reinforcements reinvigorated the Resistance fighters. They redoubled their efforts, pouring everything they had into holding the line. The war machine, sensing the shift in momentum, unleashed a barrage of attacks, its weapons tearing through the incoming ships with terrifying precision. One of the Resistance pilots managed to evade the machine's fire, maneuvering their ship into position above its head. With a desperate cry, they released a payload of explosives, aiming for the glowing core at the machine's center. The resulting blast was deafening, and for a moment it seemed like the machine might finally be defeated. But as the smoke cleared, the war machine stood tall, its armor scorched but intact. It turned its gaze upward, targeting the remaining ships with renewed fury. The reinforcements were giving everything they had, but it was clear they couldn't hold out much longer. The ground leader watched in despair as the machine continued its relentless assault. He turned to his team, his voice hoarse but determined. "We're not done yet. If that thing's still standing when the extraction team arrives, we're finished. We need to take it out. Now." The fighters exchanged uncertain glances, but they knew he was right. Gathering what remained of their weapons and explosives, they prepared for one final assault. The leader took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. This was it. The moment everything had been leading up to. As they charged forward, the war machine turned to meet them, its glowing eyes burning with malevolent intent. The resistance fighters surged forward, their weapons aimed at the massive war machine that loomed like a nightmare against the fractured skyline. The leader's voice rang out, rallying his team as they closed the distance, dodging rubble and stray energy blasts. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the machine's sheer presence warped the very air around them. But they pushed on, driven by a single, undeniable truth. If they didn't stop this thing here and now, humanity's fragile hope would be extinguished. Then, without warning, the war machine paused. Its glowing eyes dimmed for a brief moment, and a strange hum filled the air. The fighters hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks. Was it damaged? Were their efforts finally paying off? But the leader's instincts screamed otherwise. He raised a hand, signaling everyone to stop. "Hold position," he barked. "Something's not right." The hum grew louder, deeper, resonating in their chests like the tolling of a giant bell. Suddenly, beams of light shot up from the ground around the machine, forming a pulsating dome of energy. The air inside the dome shimmered, distorting their view of the war machine. Then it happened. The machine split. Its towering form seemed to disassemble into dozens of smaller, spider-like drones, each one armed and ready to strike. Panic threatened to take hold as the drones swarmed out of the dome, their movements unnervingly precise. The fighters opened fire, trying to take out as many as they could, but the drones were fast, their sleek bodies darting through the air like predatory birds. Within seconds, the battlefield was alive with chaos, the sound of gunfire and explosions mingling with the mechanical whirring of the drones. The leader's mind raced. This wasn't just a war machine, it was a tactical weapon designed to adapt and overwhelm. He shouted into his comms, desperate to warn the incoming reinforcements. "Command, the machine's transforming. It's some kind of swarm. We need backup. Now." Before he could say more, one of the drones zeroed in on his position. He dove for cover as it fired, the blast tearing through the concrete pillar he had been standing beside. His ears rang from the explosion, but he forced himself to stay focused. Scrambling to his feet, he fired at the drone, his shot hitting its central core. The machine sputtered and crashed to the ground, but there were dozens more to take its place. "Keep moving," he shouted to his team. "Don't let them pin you down." Amid the chaos, a strange figure appeared in the distance, moving with an almost inhuman grace. It was cloaked in dark armor, its features obscured by a helmet that gleamed faintly under the flickering light. The figure raised an arm, and a wave of energy rippled outward, disrupting the drones in its path. For a brief moment, the machines faltered, their movements becoming erratic. The resistance fighters stared in stunned silence as the figure advanced, its weapon a long, staff-like device emitting bursts of energy that cut through the drones with terrifying efficiency. The leader's comms crackled to life again, but this time the voice was unfamiliar. "You're outmatched," the voice said, calm and steady. "Fall back and regroup. I'll handle this." "Who are you?" the leader demanded, his grip tightening on his weapon. "And why should we trust you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it continued its assault on the drones, its movements almost too fast to follow. The leader didn't have time to argue. The resistance fighters were barely holding on, and the arrival of this mysterious ally was the only thing keeping them from being completely overwhelmed. "All right," he said reluctantly. "Everyone, fall back. Let's give them some space to work." The fighters retreated to a safer position, their eyes never leaving the battlefield. From their vantage point, they watched as the figure tore through the swarm, its attacks methodical and unrelenting. But as impressive as the display was, it was clear that even this newcomer couldn't hold out forever. The drones were adapting, their movements becoming more coordinated as they encircled their target. "This isn't going to be enough," one of the fighters muttered, fear creeping into her voice. "There's too many of them." The leader knew she was right. Even with the mysterious figure's help, the swarm was too large, too relentless. They needed a new plan, something that could turn the tide. His mind raced as he scanned the battlefield, looking for anything they could use to their advantage. Then he saw it. Near the edge of the battlefield, partially buried under rubble, was an old council transport ship. Its hull was battered and scorched, but its power core was still intact, its faint glow visible through the cracks in the metal. If they could overload the core, it might create an explosion powerful enough to wipe out the swarm. "That's our ticket," he said, pointing to the ship. "We're going to overload the core and take these things out in one shot." "Are you crazy?" another fighter said. "We'd never make it out in time." "We don't have a choice," the leader replied. "If we don't stop them here, there won't be anyone left to fight back. I need a team to cover me while I set the charges." Before anyone could respond, the mysterious figure's voice came through the comms again. "I'll handle the core. You focus on keeping the swarm off me." The leader hesitated. He didn't like the idea of relying on someone they knew nothing about, but there was no time to argue. "All right," he said. "But if you're lying to us—" "I'm not," the figure said simply. "Now move." The resistance fighters sprang into action, forming a defensive perimeter around the ship as the figure made its way to the core. The drones seemed to sense the shift in strategy, their movements becoming more aggressive as they closed in on the group. The fighters held their ground, their weapons blazing as they fought to keep the machines at bay. As the figure reached the ship, it began working on the core, its hands moving with practiced precision. The leader watched anxiously. The seconds stretched into an eternity, the battle raging around them as the figure continued its task. Finally, the comms crackled again. "The core is set to overload," the figure said. "You have 60 seconds to get clear." "You heard them," the leader shouted. "Fall back. Everyone, move." The fighters retreated as fast as they could, their movements frantic but determined. The figure remained behind, standing by the core as the timer counted down. The leader glanced back, his mind racing with questions. Who was this person? Why were they helping? And most importantly, would they survive the blast? As the resistance fighters reached a safe distance, a blinding light engulfed the battlefield. The explosion tore through the swarm, the shockwave shaking the ground and knocking the fighters off their feet. When the dust finally settled, The war machine and its drones were gone, replaced by a smoldering crater. But the figure was nowhere to be seen. As the evolved humans stood before the gathered masses, their revelation was about to unfold. The leader, a figure known only as Lyra, began to speak with a voice that carried the weight of centuries. "We are not here to condemn you," she said, her tone steady but heavy with truth. "We are here to reveal what you have forgotten. Humanity's potential is limitless, but it has been clouded, twisted by the mistakes of the past." The crowd listened intently, their breaths shallow, caught between fear and hope. Lyra's words were the key, unlocking a new vision of the world. "You were not born to destroy. You were born to evolve, to rise above your limitations. But that path has been hidden from you. We are the proof that change is possible. We were once, like you, lost, struggling, blinded by greed and violence. But we chose a different path, a path of unity, of understanding, of compassion. And we stand here today to offer you that same choice." The tension in the air grew thick as the people wrestled with her words. Some were hopeful, others skeptical. The truth was difficult to accept, a stark contrast to the world they had known. Yet there was something undeniably powerful in Lyra's gaze. It spoke of both the struggle and the triumph that had brought her people to this point. But just as it seemed the crowd might embrace the truth, a figure emerged from the shadows, an unexpected antagonist, one who had been hiding in plain sight. It was Caden, the scientist, who had been one of the leaders of the resistance against the evolved humans. He stepped forward, his eyes burning with anger. "You think you've come to save us?" His voice was cold and cutting. "You're no different from the ones who twisted our past. The very same people who built your utopia by sacrificing us." Lyra's eyes flashed with recognition, but she did not flinch. "You don't understand," she replied softly, yet with a firmness that carried the weight of truth. "You've been deceived. The ones who led you to believe we were your enemies were not us. They were the remnants of the past, those who could not let go of their desire for control." The revelation hit like a shockwave. Caden's eyes flickered with doubt, but he quickly regained his composure. "Lies. You come to manipulate us, to twist our minds with your so-called truth." Lyra raised a hand, and the crowd fell silent. "What you don't know," she continued, "is that the evolution of humanity was always meant to be a choice. Your ancestors built the foundation, but they forgot the most important part, the unity of the heart, the courage to accept what was uncomfortable. The war that tore your world apart was never about good and evil. It was about fear, and fear blinds us all." Caden took a step back, the weight of her words beginning to sink in. But before he could respond, a sudden roar echoed from the distance, a reminder that the forces they had fought for so long were still out there, still intent on maintaining the old order. As the sounds of approaching conflict grew louder, it became clear that this moment of truth would not come without a cost. And then, in an instant, the world seemed to shift. The sky above them crackled, and the ground trembled as if the very earth was reacting to the revelation. The evolved humans had not only come to reveal the truth, they had also activated something within the planet itself, a dormant power that would either save or destroy them all. In a final, unexpected twist, Lyra's voice rang out above the chaos, her words filled with a heavy finality. "The choice is yours. You can accept the truth and unite for the future, or you can remain in the darkness of the past. But know this, the earth has awakened, and it will not wait for you." The ground shook one last time as the battle raged on. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and with one final choice, the fate of all would be sealed. The ground rumbled beneath them, a reminder that the world was changing. Lyra's words had struck a chord with many, but the reality of the situation was far more complex than anyone could have predicted. The Earth itself seemed to be reacting to the revelations, as if the planet itself was waiting to see what humanity would choose. It was no longer just about a future of human evolution. It was a test of survival. Caden stood frozen, his mind racing. The anger, the fear, the uncertainty, it all collided inside him. His eyes darted between the crowd and the approaching sound of war. He had spent so many years fighting against what he had believed was the enemy, only to now face the truth. The true enemy was not Lyra and her people, but the remnants of the old world that had manipulated them all. He looked back at Lyra, her calm demeanor in stark contrast to the chaos around them. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice strained. "How do we make a choice when everything is falling apart?" Lyra's gaze softened, but her determination remained unwavering. "We make the choice by acknowledging the truth," she said. "By choosing to rebuild, not just with technology or power, but with compassion, understanding, and the willingness to let go of the past. The Earth is not our enemy. It never was. The true battle has always been within us." The words hung in the air, reverberating in the hearts of those who had gathered. There was something undeniable in Lyra's conviction. For the first time, Caden felt the weight of his own actions, his years of resistance, his distrust of the evolved humans, all the hatred he had carried in his heart. He had been so focused on the idea of fighting for freedom that he had failed to see the bigger picture. The roar of conflict was getting closer. The battle was inevitable now. But it wasn't just a battle between two groups. It was a battle for the soul of humanity. And as Caden looked around, he realized that the choice was not just his to make, it was everyone's. They were all standing at the crossroads of history. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hands to calm the crowd. The ground trembled again, and this time, it wasn't from the distant war, it was the Earth itself, responding to the collective energy of those present. The very atmosphere seemed to pulse with a kind of ancient energy, something forgotten, but now awakening. The people, some hesitant and others hopeful, began to whisper among themselves. It was clear that the idea of unity, of evolution beyond their old selves, resonated deeply with them. The truth, Lyra spoke, was something they had always known, deep within their hearts, but had been too afraid to confront. The fear of change had kept them stagnant for so long. And then, as the distant sounds of the approaching battle grew louder, something remarkable happened. The ground split open in front of them, not with violence, but with a quiet, almost peaceful force. From within the earth, glowing tendrils of energy began to emerge, winding and twisting like roots of an ancient tree. The crowd gasped in awe as the energy surged toward them, enveloping the space in a vibrant light. Lyra stood still, her arms raised as if she were welcoming the Earth's awakening. "This is the Earth's gift," she said, her voice steady. "This is the future that awaits us all if we are willing to accept it." Caden's eyes widened as he felt a wave of warmth and clarity wash over him. It was as if the Earth itself was speaking to him, offering him a path forward. He turned to face the others, seeing the same awe and recognition in their eyes. The battle, the division, the fear, they all seemed so small now, insignificant in the face of this new reality. The energy from the earth continued to grow, and it became clear that this was no ordinary force. It was a manifestation of the unity. Lyra spoke of an energy born from the collective will of humanity to change, to evolve, to let go of the destructive forces of the past. The sky above them darkened, but not in a threatening way. It was as if the clouds themselves were gathering, swirling with energy, waiting for the final moment of truth. Lyra's voice rose again, cutting through the tension. We are not just the future of humanity, we are the stewards of this planet. The Earth has always known how to heal itself, but it needs us to understand how to heal ourselves first. If we choose to embrace this moment, if we choose to evolve together, we can create a future where humanity and the Earth are no longer in conflict. Caden stepped forward, his heart pounding. The ground beneath him felt alive, pulsing with the same energy that now filled the air. He looked back at the people, their faces lit with a mix of fear, wonder, and hope. And in that moment, something shifted within him. The weight of his past, struggles, his resistance, his doubts, they all seemed to dissolve in the presence of this incredible force. He turned to Lyra. What do we do now? She smiled, a quiet understanding in her eyes. Now, we choose, together. And just like that, it happened. The energy from the earth surged forward, enveloping the crowd in a wave of light. The world seemed to stop, suspended in time. For a brief moment, there was no conflict, no war, no past mistakes, just the present, a moment of collective unity and possibility. The final twist came when the distant sounds of battle ceased. The forces that had been poised to destroy, the remnants of the old world that had sought to maintain their control, suddenly stopped. It was as if they, too, had felt the change. There were no more gunshots, no more cries of war, just a profound silence that hung in the air. The people around them stood in awe as the energy from the earth coiled upward, forming a shimmering dome of light that encased them all. It was as if the planet itself was protecting them, guiding them toward a new future. And in that moment, Caden realized that the war had never truly been about defeating an enemy. It had been about defeating the fear and division that had held humanity back for so long. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. And then, one by one, the people began to speak, their voices filled with wonder and resolve. The division that had once seemed so insurmountable began to melt away, replaced by a shared understanding. They had all seen the truth, felt the energy of the earth, and understood the choice they now faced. Caden looked around, his eyes meeting those of the people who had once been his enemies. They too were transformed, no longer divided by fear, but united by the common goal of survival and growth. Together, they would face whatever challenges the future held, knowing that the path forward was one they would walk as a united humanity. As the dome of light slowly began to fade, the earth settled into a peaceful calm. The battle was over, not because of force, but because humanity had made the choice to evolve, to unite, and to embrace the unknown. The world would never be the same again, but that was the point. The evolved humans, the ones who had arrived to reveal the truth, had done their part. They had shown humanity the way forward, but now it was up to the people themselves to build a future. It was no longer about power or control. It was about understanding, compassion, and the willingness to change. As Lyra looked around at the faces of those gathered, she knew that the journey was far from over. The challenges ahead would be great, but the future was no longer a distant dream. It was something they would create together. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope, a hope that this time humanity would choose wisely. And so, the story ended not with a battle or a victory, but with the quiet, powerful promise of a new beginning. The Earth and humanity had been given a second chance. What they did with it would be their legacy. The future was theirs to shape, and they would shape it not with power, but with unity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that together they could overcome anything. The truth had been revealed. The choice had been made. And the world, in its infinite complexity, would move forward, not as divided peoples, but as one.